Um, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, good afternoon. I hope you had a very pleasant lunch. I declare open this session of the afternoon. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Margarita Arabidze from the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. As you are aware, Georgia is the Vice President this year. I would like to start in the thanking the President of the Assembly for inviting me to preside over this plenary session. Now I invite the Assembly to turn to agenda item 15, plenary session on policies and skills for an accelerated energy transition. Please and kind reminder that the Assembly has it before it's a background document with the same title contained in A/14/B and 6. This plenary session will explore and identify and priority actions that are needed to achieve the COP28 target of tripling renewable energy projects power capacity by 2030, with a focus on the two key enablers, policies and skills. It will examine the deployment and the enabling policies that can support the delivery of the required scale-up as well as in measures to address and potential skills and shortages. This will include the upskilling and reskilling of current and the workers, as well as preparing the fast and growing young demographic to join renewable energy workforce. This session will allow members to share in the experience and success stories in this context and provide space for key stakeholders from industry, labor, and education entities, among others, and the presence and insights. Now, I would like to invite the Director General for these introductory remarks. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. As we have heard across session in the last 2 days, key ingredients for the success of the energy transition include adequate infrastructure, financing, policies, and a skilled workforce. Messages also reflect in our flagship annual report, World Energy Transition Outlook. Critically, we need a broad and integrated policy approach to accelerate the energy transition in line with the 1.5 Celsius target and unlock its socioeconomic benefits. While important, approach must go beyond merely focusing on the risking private investment or providing enabling environment for projects. Policy and measure to build local capacity and the workforce, strengthen supply chain and domestic capacities, and maximize local value creation are needed to support just and more inclusive energy transition. The vulnerability of key renewables energy industries to logistic bottlenecks, commodity and component import dependency and price volatility, as well as trade barriers, have made renewable energy supply chain a priority agenda for policymakers. If not well managed, competition, security, and scarcity challenges in renewable energy supply chain could lead to slower and even more uneven rates of renewables deployment at inflated costs. Robust and resilient global supply chain are required to support a 1.5 Celsius pathway and maximize local value creation. Policymakers should work with the private sector to identify production gaps and supply chain weakness on a national and regional basis and generate strategies to reinforce supply chain security. At the time, building a skilled energy transition workforce requires measures to both expand the talent pipeline and enhance the quality of education training provisions. Collaboration between a government agency on workforce development, industry, organized labor, and educational institutions is needed for more coordinated skill-making efforts. It is also vital to consider how just transition efforts can respond to potential labor displacement in the existing energy sector workforce, and reskill or upskill appropriately, and to address the challenges workers face in this context, including access to suitable and affordable training program and recertification. Target measures to train, recruit, and retain women and other underrepresented or marginalized groups, including older workers, ethnic and religious minority, people with disability, and those on a low income are needed to ensure the dividends of the transition are enjoyed by all. This inclusion can be implemented through targeted scholarship, government-funded training opportunity, and industry apprenticeship and mentorship schemes. In this session, we will discuss the policy and measures needed to accelerate the energy transition, expand its reach and ensure inclusivity, and maximize local value creation. Given the growing concern that the acceleration of transition will be impeded by skills shortage in the key areas, we will focus on the action needed to scale up education and training provisions. We will also listen closely to your intervention to inform our future work. Before we start the discussion, I'd like to thank the members that include Germany, Denmark, Belgium, Norway, Italy, and the UAE to continue to support IRENA's work on the socioeconomic impacts of the energy transition and the initiatives and network to ensure the availability of skills needed. Thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director General, for your remarks. Now I would like to invite Mr. Raul Alfaro Pelico, Director of the Knowledge and Policies and Finance Center at IRENA. Mr. Pelico, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great honor to address the Assembly as Director of IRENA's Knowledge, Policy and Finance Center. As the Director General just mentioned, the World Energy Transition's Outlook, IRENA's 1.5C scenario, describes an energy transition that is fully aligned with the goal of limiting global average temperature increase by the end of the century to 1.5, relative to pre-industrial levels. The 1.5C scenario offers substantial socioeconomic benefits over a business-as-usual scenario. Under the planned energy scenario, the world's real GDP would increase at a compound annual growth rate of 2.8% per year between 2023 and 2050. Under the 1.5C scenario, the world would witness an average additional annual GDP growth of 1.5% compared to the planned energy scenario. The energy transition also brings employment gains. In the planned scenario, economy-wide employment is expected to steadily increase with an estimated average compound annual growth rate of 0.4%. However, in the 1.5C scenario, is expected to lead to an average 1.7% higher economy-wide employment than the planned scenario over the 2023-2050 period. The energy transition is also expected to increase energy sector employment, with renewable energy jobs potentially tripling from the current 13.7 million to 40 million by 2050. And investments in other energy transition-related technologies could result in a substantial increase in job opportunities from today's 50 million jobs to an impressive 81 million in the same period. Although the overall impact on employment is positive, the energy transition is likely to cause labor market misalignments, as all jobs are replaced by new ones and others undergo adjustments. First, job losses and gains may occur at different times and rates. Second, new jobs may be produced in areas, regions, or countries different from those in which most job losses occur. This is especially true in areas with limited economic diversity. Third, although the retraining programs may help, the skills associated with lost jobs may not be what emerging and growing sectors are looking for, leading to educational misalignments. And fourth, those expanding industries may use some raw materials or intermediate inputs from various sectors than those supplying declining industries, generating sectoral misalignments. Just transition policies are required to prevent these misalignments from becoming barriers to the overall energy sector. These include industrial policies, such as local content requirements, tax credits, subsidies, grants, and loan guarantees for manufacturing, public research and development funds, inexpensive electricity and land, and infrastructure upgrades. Vulnerability to global supply chain disruptions, along with geopolitical rivalries, is driving a new interest in industrial policy measures to build and strengthen local capacities and create local jobs. IRENA continues to analyze such policies, along with design elements of deployment policies, such as competitive procurement mechanisms or auctions, to support objectives beyond the price, including localizing value chains. Equally important are education and training measures, and IRENA has the potential to play a unique role as a global convener to accelerate education and skill building for a sustainable energy future. IRENA has recently established the Energy Transition Education Network as a cooperation platform that aims to foster collaboration between key stakeholders, including education and training providers, industry, and governments. We invite you all to encourage universities and vocational training centers from your respective countries to join this network. As education and training measures expand to prevent widening skill gaps, they must be paired with efforts to tap talent among underrepresented groups, including women, youth, and minorities. For instance, it's crucial to acknowledge that the energy industry has long been dominated by men, a trend that extends to varying extents into the realm of renewable energy. IRENA's work has shed light on this, drawing from analysis of the PV industry, which revealed that women occupy 40% of full-time positions. Although this surpasses the 32% average across the entire renewable energy sector and nearly doubles the representation seen in wind energy, the distribution of women across different roles within the solar PV sector remains uneven. While 58% hold administrative positions, only 32% are in science, technology, engineering, and maths roles. And a mere 17% reach senior management positions. To address these disparities and foster a more inclusive environment, proactive measures are imperative. We must enact effective strategies to facilitate women's entry into the industry and enhance their opportunities for career advancement. This encompasses not only the implementation of better workplace practices, policies, and regulations, but also the establishment of robust networks and support systems tailored to provide training and mentorship for women. IRENA has long advocated for a holistic policy framework to guide the energy transition. This encompasses not only policies to facilitate renewable energy deployment, but also a suite of structural and just transition measures. Crucially, these policies must not be viewed in isolation. They also need to be understood within the context of how society interacts with our planet's delicate ecosystems. Only through such comprehensive, inclusive approaches can we hope to realize a future that is not just prosperous and sustainable, but also equitable and resilient. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pellico, for very informative and very useful information. And now I would like to invite Her Excellency, Dr. Amna bint Abdullah Al-Dakhah Al-Samshi, Minister of Climate Change and Environmental of United Arab Emirates, to deliver her keynote address. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to address you today at the IRENA Assembly. Allow me to also welcome you again to Abu Dhabi, and thank you for joining us here despite some uncharacteristic and challenging weather conditions. This session on policies and skills for an accelerated energy transition is an important one, and especially very close to my heart, coming from education in my previous capacity in the UAE government and working primarily on capacity building programs. And just before this session, I had a very insightful and delightful conversation with the IRENA youth delegate, and I believe that they are really the future decision makers. Education, capacity building, and training are crucial to long-term climate and energy security and our shared prosperity. This is especially the case in developing economies like the United Arab Emirates, where the talent pipeline offers a long-term view of what our future will look like. As such, we are pleased to see that these topics are receiving more attention at important international platforms such as the IRENA Assembly. IRENA's 2023 World Energy Transition Outlook stated that, beside infrastructure, a lack of supporting policies, regulations, skills, and institutional capacities are major barriers to a swift and seamless energy transition. As such, the international community must take a more holistic view on the role of governments in shaping policy and regulatory frameworks that maximize local value creation, encourage more young people to enter the energy and renewable energy job market, promote knowledge and technology transfers across sectors and industries. IRENA statistics, which have been shared with some of the esteemed speakers before me, IRENA statistics shows that in the last 10 years, employment in the renewable energy sector has almost doubled. 13.7 million people are already employed in the sector. But by 2030, it is expected that an additional labor force of more than 80 million is required to ensure a successful energy transition. The UAE recognizes that urgency and that need. We have been planning ahead for it for many years now. As a regional first mover and leader in renewable energy, driven by ambitious strategies and targets, including our net zero by 2050 strategic initiative and national hydrogen strategy, we have already created a surge in demand for new jobs in the renewable energy sector nationally. We also have a highly skilled and experienced workforce of experts used to working with explosive gases such as hydrogen. Harnessing their skills, leveraging their expertise, and learning from their experience will be a vital aspect of transferring skills and knowledge across sectors as the energy transition gathers pace. Preparing people for the future energy workforce starts with their education, something that the UAE recognized very early on. For example, in 2006, along with the launch of Masdar initiative, we offered students the first university courses focused on renewable energy and sustainability at the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology, which later merged with Khalifa University. And by the way, I'm a graduate of Khalifa University from my PhD program. And very proud of the young people that are graduating from those distinguished institutes. Since then, sustainability has been integrated into national curriculums. Sustainability also became a focal point for local startups and entrepreneurs building innovative enterprises to grow our food, desalinate our water, and generate our electricity. By proactively raising awareness for our climate security and sustainable development imperatives through education, we have witnessed a groundswell of innovation and action in the last decade. We're proud of the profound and transformative change that we have led, and we have carved new opportunities for our people to contribute to building a climate-secure future and delivering development opportunities for all. We have also opened doors for our youth to enter clean energy pathways through job opportunities and the opportunity to contribute to our country's growth, development, and diversification. Creating a skilled workforce requires governments to collaborate with educational institutions, to constantly look ahead, to forecast our future needs, and identify emerging gaps in such dynamic workforce. Institutions such as IRENA are crucial to supporting this process because education institutions cannot achieve that without effective partnerships. IRENA can help governments and education institutions to deepen knowledge, provide data and research and statistics, and provide development guidance at the regional and national level. Here in the UAE, we are blessed with a visionary leadership. Since our unification, just over 50 years ago, we have benefited from the guidance of our leadership. We have always emphasized the importance of investing in young people, education, and skills building programs to secure our future. This philosophy is especially crucial and relevant when it comes to the energy transition. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the energy transition represents a multifaceted challenge for everyone representing their communities in this room here today. But we believe it also offers an unprecedented opportunity to create new jobs, drive up economic participation, and ultimately deliver prosperity to all. Delivering on that opportunity calls for governments to proactively coordinate between the labor markets of the energy sector and education to close the gap of the skills gap between what we have at hand and what we need to fast-track the transition, and to leave no one behind and keep the 1.5 within reach. To do this, we encourage IRENA member countries to join the UAE in engaging with IRENA to scale up our work in this vital area of the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, for your kind remarks. Now I invite Her Excellency and Mr. Kadri Simpson, and Commissioner for Energy at the European Commission. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm delighted to address you. The transition towards a net zero energy system is changing the face of the global energy economy. Clean energy technologies are developing rapidly. New manufacturing ecosystems are growing in scale and importance. New jobs are being created. New supply chains are being formed. In all of this, there is huge opportunities for our economies, our societies, and our transition to greener world. But we must get it right. This means addressing head-on cracks already appearing on the surface. We especially need to tackle vulnerabilities and bottlenecks in global supply chains. Coupled with aggressive national industrial policies, this can create new import dependencies or exacerbate existing ones. Take Europe, for instance. We are a net importer of net zero energy technologies, and our trade balance for some of these technologies is deteriorating. We risk replacing our dependency from fossil fuels with industrial and technological dependencies. This leaves us exposed to the risk of supply chain disruptions, pushes us away from our renewable deployment targets, and ultimately slows down our path to net zero. So, what is the way forward? It boils down to two objectives. The world needs to put in place robust and sustainable global supply chain. We also need strong and resilient local supply chains. This is particularly important for developing countries so they can maximize local value creation, jobs, and economic growth. The EU sees this clearly. And we have been working on a number of different fronts to strengthen our clean tech manufacturing and diversify supplies. First, through our Net Zero Industry Act, we are ramping up investment for manufacturing of net zero technologies in Europe. Second, we are also keen to ensure a steady and affordable supply of materials critical to the clean energy transition through our European Critical Raw Materials Act. Third, we adopted a wind power action plan to help the wind manufacturing sector build up capacity and quickly emerge from a difficult few years. Fourth, we also want to have people with the right skills to deliver the energy transition on the ground. Job shortages are holding up the transition and hindering the EU's competitiveness. So we are working closely with industry and education and training providers to implement large-scale training programs. Skills academies on batteries, hydrogen, or solar will help to train or retrain hundreds of thousands of workers. Fifth, we want to strengthen international cooperation and establish strategic partnership with like-minded countries. The initiatives I just spoke about do not aim to build a fortress Europe. Let me make that clear. We very much want an international level playing field where companies can compete fairly. With this in mind, and to join forces with partners committed to the Paris Agreement, the EU will work on net zero industrial partnerships. These partnerships will promote the use of net zero technologies around the world and support investments and technical assistance. They will improve and promote cooperation, know-how and technology sharing along the net zero value chain between the EU and partner countries. They will also help the EU diversify and have a more resilient supply of net zero technologies and their components. Ultimately, this can support nascent industries in the field of clean energy technologies in partner countries with clear comparative advantages. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me thank IRENA for the important role it continues to play in supporting discussions on these fundamental questions. The stakes are high. This is about our economies and our competitiveness, but it's also about the fate of the clean energy transition and the health of our planet and generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. Now I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Felipe Henry, Vice President and the Minister of Climate, Energy, Infrastructure and Mobility, Government of Wallonia, Belgium, to deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President. Excellencies, honorable colleagues, I am deeply honored by this invitation. The COP28 showed us that we are collectively able to set a clear direction for the future. It implies an evolution of the entire energy system. These developments directly impact citizens and workers. The last days have allowed us to remember that many solutions already exist and that important developments are already ongoing. In the following of my intervention, I will mention a few of examples, all based on an essential principle. We must work on both renewable energy production and energy demand. In Belgium, and in the Walloon region in particular, we have set up some policies which perhaps could inspire you, because I think it is one of the biggest achievements of IRENA and our international meetings, sharing experiments. First example, we have put in place employment environment alliances that aim to make environmental improvements a source of economic opportunities and job creation. They are based on a continuous participatory development process which brings together and truly involves economic and social partners, business federations, unions, training centers, administrations and ministers concerned, energy, employment, economy. Together, they develop an action plan including support measures, training programs, and professional certification mechanism. Example 2, the Pax Eolienica, as we call it, wind power piece in Latin, is an answer to the fact that some wind farm projects still encounter strong opposition from citizens. The Pax includes measures to improve the social acceptability of wind projects and the involvement of municipalities and citizens. In this spirit, the Wallon government decided to impose to project developers to consult municipalities and citizens who will have the choice or not to participate at least 25% or even beyond. Promoters must ensure that they systematically present their project to the municipal authorities as far in advance as possible of the start of the permit granting procedure. It is also crucial to design a solid and sustainable system relating to the involvement of residents and their financial participation in the project. Example 3, Wallonia is a frontrunner when it comes to collective energy production schemes, such as citizen and renewable energy communities and energy sharing. Since 2019, a dedicated platform related to energy communities, CERACLE, has set up. It provides cross-functional support to initiatives in this field. Around 20 pilot projects and R&D in progress have been monitored. These modes of organizing allow us to foster active citizen participation in the energy transition and increase citizen ownership over their energy supply, all while making better use of our renewable energy capacity, and also act on demand site response. Example 4, another priority of our action is the implementation of district heating networks. We have put in place the legal framework, and the call for projects has been initiated with concrete achievements, particularly in some Walloon cities. And moreover, all of Wallonia's energy initiatives have also been implemented at the level of cities and municipalities. We have initiated a program to support the municipal energy and climate plan called POLEC with more than 160 participants. On the training sector, an accelerated transition represents a paradigm shift that also impacts employment and training. It will imply to carry out a profound revision of programs for professions most related to the transition to include new skills and knowledge. Further promote STEM studies and STEM skills within educational programs are fundamental. But moreover, efforts are needed to further increase the number of women and other underrepresented groups in STEM studies. For example, we work on a better articulation between secondary education and higher education, and also since 2022, a new one-year training in deep climate renovation coordinator has been proposed to the professionals of the building sector. In conclusion, I would like to share with you 3 words that I remember after these days: acceleration, human, and participation. The title of this session is Policies and Skills for an Accelerated Energy Transition. For this acceleration to become reality, we have collectively the responsibility to set up an integrated policy approach, including not only energy policy, but also economic, industrial, employment, and training, among others. Secondly, human. We must invest in people, whether on the side of the private sector, which has been suffering for several years from a structural shortage of qualified manpower, whether on the side of the public sector. To achieve a just transition, it is essential to protect the most vulnerable workers by ensuring their access to decent jobs through training and retraining programs. Therefore, the transition needs to be carefully managed all along the way and to be regularly adapted based on learnings and market developments. Finally, participation. I think that we should all implement governance models that serve local democracy by involving companies, citizens as worker or a consumer. Ownership of policies and measures by citizens and all stakeholders is absolutely essential. Without everyone's participation, we will not succeed in the energy transition. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Harness, thank you so much and for your remark. During the plenary session, we will hear insights from the high-level panel of the speakers on the subject matter. This discussion will be moderated by Ms. and Melinda Crane, lead and moderator of the talk show To the Point. Ms. Crane is also in the Berlin and Basin moderator and the political commentator with the background in the law and the economics. The panel discussion will be following it by the member interventions. Let me now hand over our moderator, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Vice President, and thank you also to all of our excellent keynote speakers for your opening messages. And as I was listening to the keynotes, it occurred to me that what we're talking about today here is nothing less than the linchpin between 3 words we signed up to at the COP28. And in this case, I don't mean the tripling up renewables pledge, that too, But I'm talking about swift, just, and equitable. We signed up to a transition that is swift, just, and equitable. And as I listened to all of you, I realized it is only going to be swift if it's just and equitable. If the policies that we put in place deliver local jobs, local value, local capacity and skills. And that is exactly what we want to talk about today with our excellent panel. We are going to share best practices and ideas about real-world initiatives that show promise in strengthening both local value chains and mitigating risks related to supply chain disruptions, as well as bringing everybody along. So I would like now to just say a brief word about what our format will be, and then I will introduce our guests. And basically, we are looking for 2 rounds, hopefully 3, if we make it on time, about sharing policies and best practices in the areas that I mentioned. And after that, we will return to the chair, and she will take interventions from the floor. So now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our panel, and I will keep the introduction short in the interest of time, and I'll ask the panelists to come up as I introduce you and take your seats from left, when you're facing the stage, to right. Her Excellency Miriam Dalli is the Republic of Malta's Minister for Energy, Environment, and the Grand Harbor Regeneration. Welcome to you, Excellency. I'm also very pleased to introduce Jo Tyndall. She heads the Environment Directorate at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Jo Tyndall, great to have you with us. Anna Rovsar is joining us. She's Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the Global Renewable Alliance. Welcome. Hope Jorodga joins us at very short notice. She jumped in at the last minute for a colleague who couldn't make it to Abu Dhabi. We're especially grateful to you for taking part. And Hope is the Green Development Skills Lead at Strathmore University in Kenya. And finally, I'm very pleased to welcome our youth representative, Nina Semi Butt Timothy. She is a career training program coordinator at Student Energy. Welcome to you, Nina, and your place will be that last one next to Hope. So I'd like to suggest that we begin with a first round of exchange on overarching policy frameworks to accelerate a just and equitable energy transition that also does drive local value creation. And Minister Dalli, if I may start with you, in recent years, Malta has seen a marked increase in solar installations, both decentral houses and businesses, but also large-scale solar. There is still quite a way to go to realize your ambitious target of climate neutrality in the power sector by 2050. So what strategy have you put into place to accelerate the transition, and what measures are you taking to achieve that 2050 target?
Thanks a lot for the opportunity to discuss this topic. I have to link to what you were saying in the introduction, because you mentioned 3 values which are extremely important, and they will definitely be important in this transition if we need to make sure that we do not leave anyone behind. And when I say we do not leave anyone behind, I mean both as states and also as individuals. And you are saying that this has to be a just transition, an equitable transition, a swift transition. I come from a very small island state, and when we say a just transition, I also need to emphasize that it has to be a just transition for all the different states, because all different states have different realities. Putting on the hat of the Minister for Energy from a small island state. Now, when I say small, I'm speaking about 316 kilometers squared. And that brings with it a number of challenges, and in particular, the geographical limitations, the space of the island. And you mentioned that we came a long way in the past 10 years. It's true, but there's still a long way ahead of us. We came a long way because when I look back at 2013, as a country, we were producing only around 10 megawatts of renewable energy. Now, in last year, 2023, 10 years later, we are speaking about 240 megawatts of energy. Still, percentage-wise, we're speaking about around 13.5%. So yes, there is still a lot that needs to be done. But when it comes to islands, the realities that we face, the technology that is required is different from that is required in landlocked countries, in larger countries with vast space. So whilst we are, and you mentioned rightly, that we're focusing on solar in particular, and we're speaking about rooftops for households and industry. But we know that if we continue on this path alone, there is so much that can be achieved. So we're looking outside our shores, so looking at offshore technology. Now, this doesn't come without its challenges because the bathymetry around the island is very deep, so we have very deep seas surrounding us. And whilst for other countries with shallow waters, fixed bottom technology can work, it will not work in our case. So we're looking also at floating offshore technology and the full understanding that that comes at a cost as well, because it's much more expensive than other technologies. But you mentioned SWIFT in the beginning, so we're trying to push hard to make sure that we achieve an increased percentage of renewables in the shortest time possible. And for that matter, we are working on issuing a pre-qualification questionnaire. It's like an expression of interest for investors that are willing to invest in floating offshore wind turbines. And we issued also a pre-market consultation for floating solar technology. So the ambition is there, but I would like to reiterate one point, that we need to focus also on those technologies that make sense for islands and the most particular island states.
Thank you very much. No one size fits all. And also, as we have discussed throughout the Assembly this year, significant discrepancies between countries in terms of the generation of investment, the attractiveness to investors. And I'd like to pick up on exactly that point, that asymmetry, and go over to Director Rosar, if I may. Dr. Alfaro Pelico's presentation underlined that asymmetry that has been in focus in so many discussions here. Renewables are still concentrated, investment in renewables in just a few markets. From the industry's standpoint, what are the main obstacles to building efficient renewable energy supply chains in markets that are at an early stage of development, as the Malta minister just described it? And what priority measures would you recommend in that case to maximize benefits such as job creation?
Well, thank you very much. First to IRENA, of course, for the invitation, for the question. Indeed, we as the Global Renewables Alliance, where we regroup and really represent the single voice of the renewable energy industry, we approach this very much from the tripling renewables target that has given us common language, a common sign-off on direction of travel just a few months ago. And so we approach it very much from that angle, because that gives us a signal to work with on how we want to organize and how we want to plan that going forward. And in this respect, there's two things that come to mind. One is looking towards public-private collaboration. So on the government side, how is this now being translated into national roadmaps, policies, targets that we can then in turn translate into plans going forward? So an accountability aspect that is very important. And then how can we make progress on the main points of delivery? Because from the private sector side, there is, of course, supply chains. That's a very big issue. There's also planning and permitting. There's also financing. There's also transmission infrastructure. So this is a wider piece of the puzzle that we're looking at, and that we want to approach also jobs, skilling, and capacity building around. It's going to be very important that we look at this from a systemic point of view. And if you consider that target, the emphasis that puts on the private sector side, first to get it all built,
and then from the private financiers to get it all financed. We really want to look at it from such a big angle, indeed. And if that does take us in that direction, we're going to be looking at 42 million jobs in engineering, in project management. It's a very important one, in environmental science and data analysis, O&M, so policy and regulation. And so we need to be looking at workforce development and training, factoring that really integrally into these roadmaps, into the translation of tripling on the ground. We need to be looking at collaboration with educational institutions, and I see a big space, a big opportunity here also for the civil society organizations, for NGO organizations and academia. We see obviously a big role for regulatory and policy support on certification and standards when it comes to those distinct skills across the value chain, and making sure that that is also linking to other sectors, because I think we all know, or we all have an expectation, for example, no one doubts the jobs in digital that have to be built for the future. We want that to be the same logic, the same expectation when it comes to the clean energy transition.
Thank you very much. I want to take a deep dive on skills in just a moment, but let me stay with the asymmetry, the discrepancy between markets briefly, if I may, and jump over to Hope. And Strathmore has done extensive research on this topic. So share with us what it tells us about the main supply chain challenges that developing markets face to build both on-grid and off-grid technologies, and what effective policy solutions can begin to close that gap.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So I represent academia, education institutions, and I'm from Strathmore University. And indeed, we carry out a vast range of research on renewables. And our focus is not only in Kenya, but wider sub-Saharan Africa. And we also have a lot of partnerships with European partners. So we compare notes on what we see in our continent vis-a-vis what is happening in other regions of the world. And so one of the things that we have seen from extensive research as an impediment to supply side development of both on-grid and off-grid technology is, we're seeing a lot of inadequate and efficient financial mechanism. Yeah, we do not have a robust system that would then attract investors to come into sub-Saharan Africa and invest in both on-grid and off-grid renewable energy technologies. This is because of both the real and perceived risks of investing in sub-Saharan Africa. We're also seeing challenges of very high interest rates. If you compare what we have in sub-Saharan Africa, which is between 13 to 18% of interest rates on debt loans, as compared to 3 to 4% maybe in the EU region, then that's quite high, yeah? And we're also seeing high capital costs, yeah? We see CapEx being driven very high. And even if we look at storage technologies, like battery technologies in terms of installation, this drives up CapEx to around 15% more. So these are some of the things that research then shows as impediments to the development of on-grid and off-grid technologies. Another thing that comes out strongly is policies and regulations, yeah? So we're seeing that most African countries do not have a well-detailed and put out policy and regulation mechanism. This means that we do not even know what quality means in terms of installation. We do not know what roadmaps to be followed by different investors. And we have also seen this maybe instigating a lack of interest to some of the investors that are looking to invest in sub-Saharan Africa. As I also say, the lack of standard and quality is a constraint to the growth of the on-grid and off-grid market. And also we are seeing that skills is a major concern when it comes to the supply side of development of on-grid and off-grid market. And I know a lot has been said about skills, and it's also good to mention that in Africa, we have around 12 million to 15 million youth entering the labor market, and we only have around about 3 million decent jobs annually that can then take on these youth that are in the job market. So this leaves around maybe, let's say, 9 million jobless. And we are also seeing that the renewable energy sector is mainly male-dominated. So where does that leave, our youth who are women or our youth who are in the minority group? So a lot of things that need to be done in terms of policies is coming up with a very firm and well thought out regulatory system that then would encourage not only international investors to come into Africa to invest, but also guide local investors come on. And then maybe the last thing that I would say is partnerships. A lot has been said about private and public partnerships, but we're seeing the triple helix between the government, education institutions, and also the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go on, may I just say, dear audience, we are very much looking forward to hearing from you later on in the intervention section of the debate, but we do hear a low rustle and murmur up here that makes it a bit hard to hear each other. So if you would kindly direct your attention this way, I think all of us would be very grateful. It may just be the idiosyncrasies of the audio here in the room, but yeah, very grateful if you would keep the murmur a bit quieter. Let me go now to Director Tyndall for that deep dive on skills and training policies. And OECD has done quite a bit of work in this area. So share with us, if you would, how policymakers can align such programs with evolving labor market demands to ensure that energy transition that is, in fact, swift, just, and equitable.
Well, thank you very much. And as other speakers have said, it's great to have this opportunity to talk about it. Because I do think that education and skills are not an add-on or a kind of nice to have in relation to the transition to net zero emissions, but indeed a fundamental prerequisite. And I say that for three reasons. First of all, because, as we've already heard, without the education and skills, it's not a just transition. And the consequences would be a profound negative impact on vulnerable communities and populations in many ways, some of which have just been mentioned. The second point is, and again, I think this has been alluded to, the social license for governments to pursue that transition to net zero would unravel rather rapidly if the transition is not just, fair and equitable. And in consequence, as well, the third reason is that the economy suffers. It's not going to be possible to make a transition to net zero and to do it at the speed that's needed if you can't service a green economy. So I think this hasn't been at the forefront of government thinking to date. And it's been rather a focus on the market rather than the socioeconomics of a transition to net zero, and the two need to come together. And from the OECD's point of view, we've been looking increasingly, not using our multidisciplinary approach, not only to look at it from a whole of government perspective, but to go beyond that to apply systems thinking to how you might approach a transition to net zero. So just a few quick points on, first of all, we need to scale up green education and skills training. The analysis the OECD has done shows we're facing a very severe skills shortage in green skills, and that risks slowing down the race to net zero. Only around 4 in 10 adults participate in formal or non-formal learning on the job across the OECD. And I'm sure the numbers are similar or indeed even perhaps lower beyond the OECD. To overcome this, policymakers have to prioritise lifelong learning systems. And that's for the agility and the ability to be responsive to changing circumstances. We've been looking at the transition to a green economy alongside and linked with the digital transition. And I think that's really important to look at those two together when it comes to education and skills training. Focusing on the skills needed to adapt to those twin digital and green transitions is going to help societies anticipate rather than be reactive to major societal shifts. Another point is that the geography of the green transition is clearly going to differ, with different regions being affected differently. So a place-based strategy is going to be vital, with the training needed to align with long-term local economic development strategies and business support programs. We hear a lot, and I couldn't stress it more, that for any of these things, it's important to have reliable data and information. And that allows course correction when necessary. The data and information on the geography and the characteristics of the green jobs and skills they require as the labour market evolves. So that's key to effective policy design, and as I said, also for course correction when necessary. We've got a long way to go on this. And just as one example, there is no universally agreed definition of green jobs. And just finally then, the OECD is aiming to support policymakers by providing better evidence on the skills and employer needs, as well as best practice policy guidance. So 2 examples here. The most recent OECD Skills Outlook, which we produce every 2 years, gives insights into the changes in demand for skills resulting from those twin green and digital transitions and the role skills policies play in ensuring resilience. And the second example is our flagship Net Zero Plus project, Climate and Economic Resilience in a Changing World. And that's going to include work on tracking the effects of the transition on skills demand, assessing the adequacy of current career guidance, adult learning and vocational education and training programs, as well as identifying better ways in which we can support the transition. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, I'll go over to Nina to talk to us a bit about how it is that we bring young people's voices into this debate, because ultimately they, of course, are the main beneficiaries of the energy transition and the jobs that it needs to create. But how do we make sure that they have a voice in designing the strategies and the tools?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, 2030 is our goal, and of course by 2030, most of us who are in this youth forum will be the ones who will be leading the energy transition by then. I think that what we are doing now here, having a youth forum with IRENA, first of all, is a really good initiative in that it encourages intergenerational and international conversations and cooperation. I can say by myself, from the conversations that I've had with people who have been in these spaces, holding leadership positions in organizations, holding leadership positions in government, have influenced and shaped the way that I think. And I don't think that we value that sort of interaction and relationship enough. I think that this should be beyond just IRENA, but I think that different international organizations should incorporate this idea into their own activities as well, because if you are trying to influence a generation, I think it is important that you have those candid conversations with the generation and let them know your fears, thoughts, ideas, and hopes for the future and why we are entering into this transition in the first place. And second of all, I think that it's important to not only incorporate their voices, but also incorporate their talent. For example, we have really intelligent people in the delegation from different countries. And in the youth forum as well, we have people who are actual professionals in the industry who have gone through the system, educational systems, and who have also upskilled themselves individually to a place where, you know, they can contribute to businesses and contribute to government. So I think that in incorporating voices, we should also be very intentional about incorporating their talent as well into workspaces. And the other thing that I think is really important is our panelists here have spoken about the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all perspective. I'm from Sub-Saharan Africa. I've met delegates from, you know, Middle East and Northern Africa. I've met delegates from Europe, and while we may have similar challenges, the root causes of these challenges are not the same. And we have had the chance to have conversations about how, you know, we can tackle these challenges individually, but through our own regions, our own governments. And I think that we must always have that in mind, that, you know, a one-size-fits-all approach will not work. And finally, I think it's really important, if we're talking about, you know, raising voices and being serious about things, we should be including youth in budgeting decisions in terms of government, in terms of, you know, private organizations as well have budgets for apprenticeships, internships, and other opportunities where we can learn on the job, where we can gain these new skills, and where we can lead the transition as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to do now a second round that will be a deeper dive on how we try to boost training and education in order to create the kind of foundation that we need for this development. And I want to ask all of you, please, to depart from any notes you may have brought along and simply give us a very concise answer, because we're running quite late and there is a presidential election that will happen in this room shortly. So I'd be very grateful if you can try to shrink what you have to say, in hope that we can then maybe do one last sentence in a concluding round. So, deeper dive on skills and inclusion. I'll start here with the Minister, and under your leadership, Malta has in fact revamped and extended its skills development scheme in general. Tell us how that applies to education, training, and employment within green sectors, and how you make sure it's inclusive of marginalized groups, including women. We happen to be in the majority here today, not to mention 100%, but that's not always the case. So
I'll try to be clinical in my answer as much as possible. I'll start with what we're doing. So I mentioned the skills development scheme. In Malta, we have an unemployment rate of 2.5%, and that means that the demand for skilled people, for a skilled workforce, is at an all-time high, as you might imagine. So we are making sure to push as much as possible current workforce, but also students, that will be the future workforce, in those sectors where they are mostly required. You mentioned the skills development scheme, and we introduced the scheme and revamped it, made it much more interesting for enterprises in Malta, because we wanted to make sure that our enterprises have the opportunity, have the financial aid to ensure that workers are reskilled or upskilled, depending on what is required in the market, in the work market, in the employment market. We made sure that for women that go into the scheme, there is an added incentive so that employers themselves will have that added incentive to actually help women and the most vulnerable to be upskilled and reskilled as well. And when I say we added an incentive, is that the percentage for training that is offered for this particular scheme is higher in the case of women and the most vulnerable. What we are doing as well when it comes to the potential workforce, students. In Malta, we provide a stipend to students. So for those courses where a more qualified, a more skilled workforce is required, and increased stipend is provided as well, because we want to entice students to go in that direction. We focus primarily on the university aspect. We have the Renewable Institute, Renewable Energy Institute, the Sustainable Development Institute, and there are specified courses in that direction. And there is also the technical arm. It's called the Malta College for Art, Science, and Technology. However, I have to mention two areas where I believe we can do much more.
Super short.
Yes, we need to start from the primary school, yes. We need to start educating our younger students to start loving STEM, to start loving the science, technology, engineering, maths, and we need to make STEM for girls and women much, much more enticing and interesting.
Thank you very much. Again, I'll jump over to Anna Rosa. And we heard earlier from the UAE Climate Minister the number 13.7. That's global employment in clean energy right now. One global consultancy group has estimated that the skills gap by 2030 could be nearly half that, actually more than half that, could be 7 million. So that's a very significant figure. What does that mean for companies? Where are skills development programs most crucial? Are there particular sectors? And what are the key drivers when you reskill? All of that in a minute.
Perhaps the best way to look at this is to pick up again from the point of how do we approach, how do we make this happen going forward? Because it's picking up on a point that Hope had mentioned on the financing aspect. These jobs, to make them happen, we need to be seeing tremendous amounts of finance going within that. Thank you. We need to be seeing, picking up from Hope's point on financing, we need to be seeing up to $10 trillion going into the renewable energy space to triple. What that means is we need to triple annual investment globally from the levels where it's at today, which, make no mistake, is at record highs. So we are setting steps in the right direction, but we need to triple that on a yearly basis. And that in turn also needs to trickle down and further towards emerging markets and developing economies, because right now around 85% of that clean energy investment is going to global north. So there is, you were mentioning earlier, sort of a disconnect in terms of where that attention needs to go to, where do we need to focus that financing, and where does the job and skill aspect need to come into. We need to be working on that tremendously from a top-down approach. And so here, to understand this going further, I think I've lost my thought. Please. Yes, thank you.
Basically, the question was what it concretely means for employers. I assume it simply slows down the process. It means that they can't move at the speed they would like to. So we can leave that one aside. But where is it most important to concentrate efforts in skills development, education, and training, and reskilling? How challenging is that? What can make it work?
We're going to need to see the majority of the attention go towards the manufacturing capacities, how to expand those also from regional perspectives, how those can be brought out and also scaled up for the years to come, especially if we need to be tripling those, because the financing that's going to come in that, if we get the right signals in that direction, we need to be seeing that go to scale. So it's about supply chains, growing them, and bringing them more towards a regional scale. So I'm looking again towards Hope, but how we tackle that from a sub-Saharan Africa perspective, for example, how we're going to grow those local manufacturing supply chains that is going to be extremely important, and that need to be featured into the policy debate and the financing debate as well. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. And if I may, I would go now to Hope once again. And how should service providers working in the area of education and training innovate to meet the skills demands for the energy transition? Please share, if you have them, concrete examples of skilling initiatives that have proven effective.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of innovation to meet skilling demand, we do have the challenge where it's usually said that academic modules are rigid. maybe it takes 4 years to influence or change curricula to actually meet the demand needed in the industry. So a lot of innovation is needed to actually tackle, even if you're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and new ways of tackling and reaching the sustainable energy goals are indeed discussed every day. So how can academic institutions then meet this demand with a curricula that maybe takes only 4 years to actually incorporate these changes? So one is ability to conduct needs assessment on a regular basis on targeted audience. So what I mean by targeted audience is within respective renewable energy technologies like green hydrogen, geothermal, solar PV, what are the needs, skill needs that exist within these different technologies, and how can we meet them? And as Nina said, it's not a one-size-fits solution. That's why we really need to be specific on what are the needs for the youth, for the existing labor force, both even the old generation who need upskilling and reskilling. What are the needs of women and the minority group in the renewable energy space in terms of skilling? So we need to do deep dives and specifically meet the needs of the specific audiences that we are looking at skilling. And then we also have to come up with customized training programs. We're not looking at your traditional 4-year training program, but if you indeed maybe are an electrical engineer and you need further training in green hydrogen, then we come up with customized modules that would increase your capacity. The other thing is to mainstream sustainability. We have these core units, for example, in academic institutions, where you take maybe a unit in critical thinking, a unit in maybe, let's say, leadership. So sustainability could be one of these modules that are offered across the board, no matter what discipline you're taking, to raise your awareness and also to sort of show you how to then incorporate sustainability, whether you're from a medical background, whether you're looking at a manufacturing business perspective, because indeed climate change does affect all sectors. And lastly, I would say the triple helix, where we insist on partnerships. Private sector, public sector, and academic institutions partnering. So if we have this kind of partnerships where we proactively get feedback from these 3 actors, then we're going to be able to see what are the entry points to innovate when it comes to skilling in the renewable energy sector. Thank you.
Joe Tyndall, so a statement there clearly underlying the importance of data, which you mentioned as a key element of this. Hope is telling us basically know about the groups that you're trying to bring into the picture. Talk to us a little bit more about your insights at the OECD on diversity and inclusion and how we can be most effective in promoting true equality of opportunity, especially for socioeconomically disadvantaged groups.
Thank you very much. 2 quick points. First, a problem and then a solution. So we've done analysis that shows that low-skilled workers are over 3 times less likely to participate in training than high-skilled workers across the OECD. So people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds are also less likely to gain proficiency in a range of skills during formal education, and that obviously makes them much more vulnerable in the case of both the green and the digital transitions. It's worth noting that it's critical for adequate upskilling and reskilling. It's critical to ensure continued support for policy action on climate and the environment. We've got analysis that shows that for every 1% increase in unemployment, the percentage of adults who report prioritising the environment ahead of the economy declines by 1.7%. So the answer, to pick up on your point, again, I want to stress that to promote equality of opportunity for skills training, access to reliable data and information is essential, both to identify the populations, the communities that don't have the proficiency and the skills they're going to need that will grow in importance, and secondly, to develop effective policy responses to support them in building that proficiency. And again, that does need to be targeted to local net zero economic development strategies. Now, all of this is absolutely key to building system level resilience. And that's because ultimately the outcomes of the environmental transformations are going to be defined by the actions and behaviours of each of us as individuals, of all individuals. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Nina, if I can pose one more question to you. We keep hearing about all the job opportunities that will be out there. How accessible are they in reality to young people? And what do you think is most crucial to make young people aware of these opportunities and essentially do what the minister told us, make this area attractive to young people and girls and women?
Thank you for that question. I think your question is actually 3 in 1. The first part is the accessibility of those opportunities. And the second part sort of answers the first part. The opportunities might exist. There are opportunities, but there is very little awareness of their existence. Some companies may have internship positions, but the openings are only advertised internally or within a small group of people, and so it's very hard for young people to know that these opportunities actually exist. And I think that again, this youth forum is helping to solve that, because even here, young people are able to share the existence of some of these opportunities, including, when it comes to internships. I've already spoken about internships, apprenticeships, but there's also the issue of funding, because we also have young people who are entrepreneurs in the system and are looking for funding, but do not know the existence of certain funds or grants that are available for them to access, and or they do not even know how to access those grants or funds. So I think that is, one problem, which is the access, which affects the accessibility, which is the awareness. We need to do more in terms of sharing that these opportunities exist. And of course, we can always have more grants. I think it is grants and opportunities that are, let's say, come at a discounted price for young people, because we are just starting our lives. And so even if forums like this exist, it might be difficult for young people to access them, because some of them are in different continents far away. And so accessibility becomes an issue for these young people. I think also that, so to address the last part, which is, yes, very briefly, which is how can we ensure that they are aware, and what are priorities in building a skill talent pipeline. I think the first priority is to make it a priority. A lot of people say that, they support young people, but they do not have actual opportunities within their organizations to support young people. I think young people need to make those opportunities available. And lastly, I would say that in the youth lounge, we were able to come up with 3 key areas, which we thought were an impediment in getting opportunities, which was that there wasn't enough career guidance around, because this is a new area and people don't know the opportunities that exist for them, as well as funding, and then finally getting experience. So please take a risk with youth and provide those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just look over to our organizers that I can't see right now. Do I have 1 more minute? 1? Okay. So my minute, I would like to use it to ask each of you to finish the following question, but literally only finish it. So we're talking about 15 seconds, okay? What role would you like to see IRENA play going forward in accelerating skill policies for the transition? What is the single most important thing IRENA can do? Minister?
Provide the right platform for sharing know-how and knowledge, and also promote exchange programs, because we can all learn from one another.
Thank you. Director Tyndall.
Keep doing what IRENA is doing, providing the foundational data on renewable energy jobs. It's something we refer to at the OECD very often, and looking at that intersection between the market and the socio-economic aspects of the transition to net zero.
Ana Rosa.
Make the excellent youth forum ambassadors of the fantastic analysis on jobs, the ambassadors of the renewable energy jobs. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Hope Jagora.
To support the member countries or to link them with the necessary resources to build capacity and skills in the renewable energy sector.
And finally, Nina Somebot Timothy.
I would like to see them use social media to their advantage. They have the resources, but they are not, people are not aware that they exist. So use social media to your advantage in that respect.
Thank you very, very much. I think it's no accident that our panel on skills was 100% populated by very skillful women. Let's give them a very warm round of applause, please, dear audience. And I will not use up any more of our time with an attempt at a summary. I will simply hand back to the chair to continue the session with many thanks to all of you, dear audience, for your attention during our discussion.